Okay, good evening. Thanks for everyone coming out. Favor say aye. Aye. All right, approved. Thank you. All right, we're going to go on to, I think, is Kenny's? Yep. Do you have a? Okay. No, anyone? How's it looking out there? Okay. Fire company report?
All right, for the month of November for EMS, they had 194 dispatches. There 138 of those were in New Garden, 11 Avondale Borough, 2 London Britain, 6 Franklin, and 2 West Marlboro. They had 17 in London Grove, 2 Londonderry, 2 Kennett Borough, 3 Newcastle, 2 East Marlboro, 7 Penn, and 2 New London Township. There were 80 BLS transports and 47 ALS transports. There were 19 refusals, 11 recalls, 22 no services, 6 assist fire department, and 9 QRS. There was 105 6A to 6P, 89 of 6P to 6A. Total transports missed were 24, or total dispatches missed were 24. 18 out of 24 were transports. They were missed 19 in New Garden, 3 in Avondale Borough, 2 in Franklin. They took 36 second dispatches and 4 third. They were covered by Longwood EMS for 8, transported 8. West Grove for 5 and transported 5. Okeson 9 and transported 5. And there's 2 non-transports. Dispatch to arrival time is 10 minutes. Dispatch to available in quarters is 63. The fire is a abbreviated report for November. There were 61 dispatches, 32 in New Garden, 3 in Avondale Borough, 2 London Britain, 4 Franklin, 1 West Marlboro. Out of district dispatches were 1 Delaware County, 4 Cecil County, 1 Lower Oxford Township, 1 Kennet Borough, 1 Kennet Township, 1 London Grove Township, and 9 Newcastle. 7A, 3P, there were 25, 3P to 11, there's 31, and 11P to 7A is 5. Response times per shift were 11 for 7A to 3P, 5 minutes from 3P to 11 p.m., and then 7 minutes from 11P to 7 a.m. 10.5 million were value of property protected. 15 structures, 9 EMS, 14 motor vehicle accidents, 5 assist police, 6 dispatches canceled en route, 4 cover other stations, 1 odor investigation, 1 CO alarm investigation, 1 for service, 2 trash, 1 vegetation, 1 fuel spill, and 1 vehicle. That is the fire company report for the month of November.
Great, thank you. Any questions before? No? Okay, and for the last and final meeting of the year, I will remember to call on the police for their report.
Good evening, everybody. Just want to give you some information on the patrol CIU, TSU, and a little bit of just some reminders for the holiday season. Patrol had 125 citations, 73 warnings. Sorry, this is for the month of November. 6 parking tickets, 2 DUI arrests, and 3 drug-related arrests. The month of November, we handled 222 calls for service in New Garden Township. And I'm sorry, this date is New Garden Township specific. It's not Avondale Borough or West Grove Borough. We only had 3 Part 1 crimes, all of which were thefts. Part 1 crimes consist of your more serious crimes. We kind of attribute the low number of the Part 1s as a result of excellent officer presence, active patrols, proactive enforcement, keeps those numbers down for everybody, and keeps our more serious crimes on the lower end. Our criminal investigations unit handled a 1 Megan's Law violation, which was cleared through investigation, and 1 children youth 47 complaint, which was also cleared through investigation. And this is along with their ongoing and open investigations that they're still working on. Our traffic safety unit with the paving of Star Road, I know it's already a drag strip, so with the paving of it, people tend to move a little quicker. So we've been setting up some speed details and things of that nature up there. Our traffic safety unit has been trying to keep a finger on the pulse of that. So as far as some news for the department, our accreditation process is complete now, and we were recommended for reaccreditation. Our guys worked real hard and got us up to the level we had to be to maintain our accredited status. So we're still there. We're still an accredited agency. A lot of work goes into that. So it's quite an accomplishment. Our new hire, Josh DeWeese, just completed his field training, and he is assigned to the mid-shift rotation for A and B platoons. Those of you who aren't familiar with him, he was a captain from Chester City PD with about 18 years experience. So he's bringing a lot of knowledge to the table, and we're lucky to have him. Just some reminders to share with your family and friends. I know some of this is redundant, but remember to watch your packages left on your porches this time of year. Give us a call if anything seems suspicious. You know, odd cars in your neighborhoods following UPS trucks or anything like that. Give us a call. Packages, purses, phones, valuables. Don't leave them in your car in plain sight, especially places like gyms, fitness centers, parks. These are the places where people tend to do the biggest amounts of smash and grabs because they know people are leaving things in their cars when they go to those locations. After Christmas and year round, just, remember to be careful about discarding your items by the curb, things like TV boxes, electronic boxes, games, console boxes. It kind of just lets everybody know what's in your house. And lastly, just remember not to post all your, your vacation plans and things like that on social media if you're planning on leaving town or whatever, because anybody that sees that knows you're not going to be home. So other than that, if you are leaving for any extended period of time, feel free to stop by the station and fill out a vacation notice, and we'll keep an eye on your house for you. Other than that, if anybody doesn't have any questions, all right.
Yeah, great.
Have a great holiday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to regular business. And first up is the New Garden Township fiscal year 2024 final approval brief by Chris.
And just want to check, it was sounding kind of, and so. Is that better? Can everyone hear me? I just want to make sure it doesn't get too much of a reverb here. All right, well, good evening, members of the board, residents, staff. I'm Chris Himes, I'm the township manager. I'm here to be completing, I guess, yeah, that's what I was talking about. All right. How's that? All right, a little bit better. The final version of the approval process for the 2024 fiscal year 24, New Garden Township budget as proposed. It was motion to advertise back in the November meeting. We received, limited public input, no motions to from here on out. I mean, there was no kind of push to recommend by the board structural changes. So essentially, nothing has changed since the last advertised portion from the township. So I just wanted to kind of go over kind of the bottom line up front here, which is essentially getting down to kind of the main provision that we're going to be adopting tonight, which is the proposed tax increase. We can go into some kind of underlying details about that, but this is a different order than I had in the actual packet. So I just wanted to change it just to get the information brought up front. But for tonight's presentation, none of the budget slides have changed, just the order in and of itself. So everyone has all the same information that's going to be up here. So just as a quick kind of context update, this is essentially the last decade of, we'll call them like tax increases across all three taxing entities that impact your property taxes for both residential and commercial properties within New Garden Township. And specifically what we're talking about here is the millage rate, for New Garden Township, and just looking at that overall valuation of that growth over time, which for this part has mostly been to having very little realized residential growth over the course of the last decade, and kind of what that's meant in terms of the fallout for 10 years of, as gradual increases have been made to the total expenditures for New Garden Township, one of our primary revenue streams has increased very little. And that's in relation to our overall partners, specifically in schools. They've kind of played a much more significant factor in terms of not only they already at a significantly high rate, but over the course of the last decade, they've continually added to that. So you can see kind of the imbalance that was creating. In addition to that, what's happening to the slide deck here? All right, there you go. So total overall, not to just kind of itemize out just property taxes, but also earned income taxes. So we're talking about total tax revenue growth for the township. And this is going back from 2014 as well. We've had total, it's here, I'm gonna have to have you stop kind of playing with the screen right now. Total increase overall of just $746,000 of earned income tax growth during that time frame. So if you pair that with the primary other revenue you have, which is property taxes, you're looking at $877,000 total in the last decade. So that's kind of been our total tax growth for our primary two. And I've constantly talked about what primary tax revenues we have. I'm always talking about property tax and earned income tax. Those together kind of formulate your strategy of how much you're willing to anchor expenditures and fund operations, capital, everything all the way across the board. So that's how we're talking about total taxation growth, because we haven't increased the millage rate, and really we've just been subject by that somewhat of a small, we'll call them expansionary effort for a few different developments and some just overall increases in wages from an economic standpoint for just the macro economy. That's kind of been the value add to the township, both for those working in the township and those who reside in the township subject to earned income tax. In that same measure, our expenditure growth has been significantly more, almost 3-to-1 kind of ratio. So over the course of the last decade, we've talked about the fact that we've had nominal revenue growth, but we've had a significant expenditure growth. And for the most part, this is for the fact that 2015 going into 2016, we expanded the regional entity of the police department. So that was a significant portion in terms of just an uptick in cost. We had the expansion of our fire services in terms of just having to provide as the primary municipal contributor towards fire services in the township. That's played a significant factor into it. And then as well as staff as well. So kind of all three of those compounding efforts have equated to roughly about a third of that total overall expenditure increase. So that's where I'm saying is, if you're looking at this and saying that if you can itemize out all the expenditures and show them as necessary growth measures of a township that's just absorbing more capacity and having to kind of meet the level of the expected, we'll call them operational output, our revenues have been the issue for the most part, just because they just haven't been able to sustain that kind of expenditure growth rate increase with that. And that's not because we didn't want it, we budgeted for it, we just didn't have tax rate revenue behind it. And that leads into some discussion we'll talk about later, which is the township's historical reliance annually on the structural use of cash to plug the budget. That is, we good? All right. The structural use of cash is kind of what has made our budgets work, but it hasn't been functional. We'll talk about that in the later slide, but this kind of growth challenge, if you will, has meant that we've had this continued reliance of we'll keep a flat rate, we'll structurally use cash, we'll end up not using that cash, we'll end up basically punting on the year, and then we'll do it again year over year over year. And I'm sorry, this is actually really annoying. How's that? Is that better? Okay. I'll try to continue to stay away. It's a little sensitive when we had that power outage today, so I'm wondering if a lot of things got out of whack. So this is the overall breakdown of what we're doing for the increase. And so there's been a lot of numbers thrown out. There's been a lot of percentages thrown out. But at the end of the day, what we're talking about, what we ended up doing was we heard our residents, they provided us the feedback, and we said, all right, instead of the original discussion, which was an entire 2.18 increase, which was going to be up to 3.9 mils, that was essentially if we plug the entire deficit that we had with just property tax rate increase, that's what it equated to. And then when we heard feedback from township residents, as well as just kind of board asking for more information, we started talking furthermore about options. And we have this sewer investment fund balance that's creating a sizable percentage of interest income. Can we leverage that as an asset to lower the impact of the increase in and of itself? And how long can we do that? Well, it turns out, at least for year one, this is a strategy that makes sense for the township. We had a significant performance of it in fiscal year 23. At least in the start of fiscal year 24, it's still performing at an aggregate higher level than what we have budgeted for. And this is one where moving into 24, albeit we had been using that cash as kind of like a one-for-one measure of supporting our entire paving program, we can sacrifice a little bit of doing everything we want to do for a paving program, take that same interest income and use it for our general fund to kind of keep it so we're not having to do the full measure of increase. And that's what this ends up being, just for our general fund. So right now, the adopted rate is going to be a 1.05 increase as proposed for recommended to adopt, which equates to a total up to 2.77 property tax rate for FY24. So that goes from 1.72 to 2.77. So there's your 1.05. And in that same ilk, you're talking about what that means in terms of, we'll call it the kind of average impact to your resident. That's what you're talking about here in terms of just what that overall tax rate increase goes to. what that total increase is. And then for a house that's valued at $186,000, that is what your overall monthly increase is going to be at the end of this increase. And so we picked 186. If you remember, we had kind of a breakdown of all the different property valuations in terms of bands of values for the township. And just from everyone remembers, this is your Chester County assessed property assessment. This isn't your fair market value of your house. And so one thing everyone just continues to kind of realize is the fact that Chester County is pretty far behind in terms of recency of assessments. In fact, the last one they did was in 1998. So right now we have a lot of people who have kind of an understanding that my fair market is somewhere near my assessment. And the reality is, especially in our township, is that the usual gap is almost half of your fair market assessment. So there's a sizable gap there. Regardless, for the most part, I think it was almost 75+% of the township households kind of fall in this plus or minus a few thousand degrees to the left and the right of 186,000. So for the most part, that's what we use for our average. There's a tax chart after this that shows every single stratified area and what that means, but this was the average just for providing for these graphics. So summary, excuse me, this is going to be annoying all night. Some of the positives that we have for this tax rate option was that we were able to at least address a sizable plug in our structural deficit by using non-cash revenue to fund the budget, because that was a big thing. We were essentially budgeting for the use of cash, which up until last year had been the strategy where you put a budget up against the board, you try to underperform it, and then your actuals end up being just a little bit lower, but you didn't actually get anything done. You just had a budget, and then you just kind of rinsed and repeated. And that's not necessarily a measure of a successful strategy. It's just the fact that we were just kind of doing that. For this year, I think our structural use of cash ended up being over $850,000. So we worked to a T executing the adopted budget as it was advertised and adopted. And that's saying that going into next year and the year after that, if we had carried forward that use of cash, we would eventually just spend down our entire general fund cash position into a measure of zero. And then when that goes down to zero, now you're just left with having to replace not only your revenue for what you're going to do for your general fund, but also now you're out of general fund cash. And now you no longer have kind of an unrestricted fund balance position to support just the general things that happen from year to year in terms of variables with your general fund in and of itself. So the kind of one way to say that is that's a very bad situation to get yourself into if you're not managing your money correctly. So another one, and this was one where it was brought up in a couple other meetings, was that this gives us flexibility. Just by measuring the kind of temperature in the room of, is this year one of a 2-year increase, or is this a 1-year increase? This is a flexible option so we can reassess for next year's budget. That's what this is. So there is a growth path where we can understand where we have interest income, it's a solvent balance of cash, and it allows us to be able to support multiple different components of not only our general fund, but also our capital fund. So now we have these two things in place these two areas that we can kind of pivot interest income to support. Now, when we get going towards the end part of next year in that same mindset is there a path to kind of activating some of these on-the-shelf developments that we have coming up, Thompson property being one of them, the Bancroft, Rouse Chamberlain property, and do the revenues supported by those developments get us by through going into FY25 into 26? We'll know more because those developments are now kind of through kind of a sticking point in the land development process. And so we'll be able to forecast those revenues now that they're no longer being encumbered by certain, I'll call them just like issues going through that process in of itself. So with that forecasted growth, whenever they do get those online with the cash that we have, do we have the ability to kind of use this as a float option until we achieve that growth? Because that's been the goal all along is trying to get through to grow the township to enable to support the ability to not have increased expenditure costs come without tax rate increases, if that makes sense. So that's the strategy that we have in place. Another one is this offsets the total impact of a tax increase using a phased approach. If we were to do a phased approach, the half increase was a year 1 versus year 2 measure. So this lowers that total bump. So it helps out those who have kind of a sticking point with affordability based off of their assessed values and maybe some sort of fixed income that they might be on. So that was another key part to doing this. And then another one is it just kind of buys us a year to kind of reassess. You know, we have some sizable capital projects that haven't been fully fleshed out in terms of their renewed master plans. When I'm saying that, I'm speaking specifically of our two big public parks that we talked about in the summer timeframe for New Garden Hills. We all learned together that that was a sizable capital cost to the township that not a lot of people were supporting. And it was one where we were in the process of doing it before we actually pulled that back. And now we're looking at the Lochner Golf Course where there's another potential master plan to convert two previous open space purchase park properties into being more viable uses of maybe implementing some public facilities there, doing some sort of call it managed capital investment into those facilities. You know, if we were able to kind of if we were able to lower the implementation costs, we're not using cash for capital, which means we don't have to worry about our replacement of capital cash in future years. So that's another thing that we can have to kind of lower future increases as well. So those are the positives. Some of the negatives is because we talked about a lot of the interest income we had originally put to fund all of our paving that we wanted to get done as sooner rather than later, specifically finishing Star Road, doing all of Hillendale Road and Pemberton Road, which were kind of items 1, 2, and 3 in terms of a critical replacement list. Those are the highest amount of potholes per square foot, if you will, of stretches of road of township-owned roads. And it's one where we get the most amount of public feedback of there's pretty poor conditions. That's still part of the plan, but instead of doing all of those in about 2 years, we're fleshed it out to be about 3 to 4 years. So it's still funded. We just had to stretch out that timeline to get them all done. So not ideal, because at some point next year, the year after, could those price points change because of the amount of cost to pave a road? Absolutely. We just expose ourselves to that risk by doing this plan. Continuation of having a structurally imbalanced budget. So me as a manager, in terms of what I am ethically inclined to support in terms of a cash plan that is fully solvent, you know, this is not technically that. Just because Pennsylvania allows us to use structural cash to balance the budget, that doesn't mean that you don't have a purported deficit because you don't have enough revenue to cover expenditures. That's what we're still doing. We're mitigating that, but not using cash for it, which is preferred over interest income, which is just dividend cash. So we're still doing that act, but we're not doing it off of non-replaceable revenue, which is at least an improvement. It would be much worse if we were just continuing to just burn cash into the general fund with no viable stream behind it, potentially to replace that revenue, to replace that cash. I think I have 2 more here. I'll just go think. The one thing that we don't have in our budget right now in terms of, we'll call them sustainable replenishment of capital cash right now, is our transfers to capital in the first place. So when you're talking about covering all of your expenditures with your revenues coming from sources of revenue for a township, which for us is primarily taxes and like fees and fines and services, that should not only include just your operating costs, but it should include transfers to other funds in that. And right now we have a very small previously provided balance. I think it's about $243,000 per year of replacement revenue into the capital fund from general fund. That is an arbitrary number in the fact that that was just what was there from the year prior. So we're just deferring that right now. Is that what the township actually needs moving forward? As a best practice, you usually want your transfers to be somewhere in the wheelhouse of like 8 to 10% of your general fund, because that's usually indicative of the scale of kind of call them capital projects that you might have for the type of operations that you do. So that's one where we had it at least projected in the FY26 budget to raise it from 243 to 750, just to make sure that that capital cash replacement rate is commensurate with the type of capital projects we have to fund as a township. And then last but not least, we assessed it here, but the 2.18 originally proposed increase, that's indicative of still the remaining problem that's being plugged with this kind of, we'll call it interim plan, but it's still not a fully solvent plan. If there's some sort of outfall kind of from a macroeconomic perspective, and we want to bank on the fact that we're going to have, you know, this much interest by the end of this point next year, if rates plummet, if performance goes down, I believe our advisors at Pliget said that it's currently, and then going into next year, you'll start to see a reduction, and the projected point was 4% by the end of 24. You know, that's just by their measure as well. So that's something that's at least giving us information, but is indicative of something that's absolutely going to happen. That is not. So we're still living with that risk of underperformance of that interest income. And so by using interest income to support operations, we're accepting that risk. So this is the overall, when I talked about kind of the valuation of properties in every single possible iteration that is available in the township, this is what I'm talking about. So as you're kind of walking from left to right across, this is all of your base assessments that are representative in the township. And at the end of the day, these are your actual monthly increases per that assessed property. So this is posted. I believe it's online. We'll post it again as well, just as a reference chart. So if you ever want to go in there and kind of look at what this means for me, this is what that means for you. Now with that, 80% of all township properties fall within this band. So regardless of whether or not you're in this band, you're going to realize some sort of, at the bottom end, $4 to upper end $22 increase per month. So we're solving for the vast majority of impacted properties by just doing, because it kind of stratifies out. There's a lot of like onesies, twosies above that and some below that as well. But this is kind of captures the significant portion of properties within the township. And then this is just another version of the slide that we provided in prior presentations, but just to kind of let people know that, you know, this is the overall kind of breakdown of all of your tax rates from different authorities. So it's just showing at the end of the day, even with the increase, the cost per month based off of other taxing costs per month, based on the fact that this is providing police, fire, public works, a sizable amount of services, critical services to the taxpayer from the township side. And this is for this assessed household. Granted, it's going to be lower or higher based upon your specific assessment, that we still believe that this is a path that there's still a tremendous amount of value being provided to the residents. So if that's the discussion at the end of the day of what am I getting, you're getting a significant amount of services that you may or may not be tapping into every single day, but at some point you will, and that's how much it is per month from your property tax rate based off of that type of house assessed value, if that makes sense. So just kind of reviewing some kind of high level goals. These are the things that I talked about were kind of guiding the reason that we were trying to do all this in the first place. So these are just going to be kind of like a little bit of a redundant explanation here. But the 1.05 increase raises gross $867,000. And also talking about that, the biggest part of this increase, because there's been a narrative of, you know, we've added some staffing, we've added this over here for police, we've added that there for fire. You know, this rate increase today isn't even with this amount about providing for things that were just added. This is about 10 years worth of expenditure growth that we're talking about. So we're basically doing kind of a retroactive understanding of this was basically added, but within an insolvent position, we have to lift the floor of our revenues to be able to fund this moving forward. And because of the percentage scale of the increase, the half increase, it equates to about 60% more. The reason for that big number being in existence in the first place is because it's been so long since we did the last one. That's why. So overall, we're talking about the tax increases funding about when I first got to the township, and we talked about having to kind of do some kind of amendments to the budget to remove kind of the influx of ARPA funding into the general fund. You know, the base floor, and this is in the budget as well, structural use of cash was about 1.187 million. You know, this increase supports about 73% of that total prior deficit for the last decade. So that's what you can kind of say is that we're raising the tax increase to fund 73% of our structural deficit as of 2023. I know that's kind of an awkward thing to say, but that's kind of what it exactly ends up being. And then we're using interest income to fund the rest. And that's kind of plugging the rest of it, as well as some cash from the general fund, just to kind of put in as a protective measure against possible things like if revenues go down or some sort of outfall for things. So that's kind of like a we'll call it like a slush expense using general fund balance from there. I already hit on this one, but you know, this kind of if those not familiar with GFOA concepts for General Financial Officers Association, these are budgeting best practices. In terms of what we are supposed to be able to provide is just recurring revenues to exceed or equal recurring expenditures. You know, not a novel concept, but this is something that I think because of the provision in the Pennsylvania side of the things that allows people to use cash to kind of carry over, I'll call it prior year's financial plans that might not make total sense to continue forward with. Just as another aside, we haven't had a zero structural use of cash since 2010's fiscal year budget. So this has been a practice that's been in place for a long, long time. So every time that you go forward and look at the budget, the first thing that I would usually draw my eye to is you look at all of the revenue side, and then you go down to the very bottom line, and you say structural use of cash, because that's a GL that it's allowed to be able to be utilized by the Pennsylvania recommendation for line items when you're in your general ledger. If that is not zero, that should tell you as a resident that the plan is somewhat off. What's wrong with the plan because we're using cash to balance the budget? What does that mean? And normally you would have a fiscal policy in place, which we are working to set up and implement this fiscal year, that says that if you have this structural cash item in here, why and how do we correct that to bring it back down to zero? So I want that to be part of the township's future, that if we ever have that, we basically have a course of action to get back towards a revenue neutral position for expenditures, if that makes sense. This is just from 2017. There was a couple of balances. I just kind of wanted to keep it all in one slide, and I have another bullet point here, but just giving you a sense of not only how much they were historically, but how much they actually increased to. You know, for the last 5 years, you've had over $1 million plus on average every single year, year over year, the structural cash. So I just said that equals deficit, and that should be an alarm kind of mechanism point. And yet we've been kind of doing this year over year over the course of the last several years, dating back to even a nominal use of it in 2010. So this is something that I want to make sure that everybody understands, that that's not what is the best practice in terms of funding an operational plan. And then I already talked about what we're currently doing right now, which is, you know, the use of cash for this year. We are using cash. That was part of the adopted plan, and we had operations to fund. That's how much we ended up spending. Of the 1.187, we came close to it. And the biggest reason was because we didn't have a fully staffed public works department for the entire year, because we were down 2 to 3 people at the start, and eventually we were able to replace them. But we had, some expenditure reductions because of that fact, if that makes sense. So that was just the bullet point 1, which is balancing the budget, but it was the number one thing that we had to do. In order to move forward and plan for future operations, future endeavors, future capital, you have to make sure that you have a solvent budget plan, and I believe we're at least on the path to doing that. So leveraging our fiscal strengths, this is one where we're talking about primary use of that interest income that we have. And just to kind of provide some context to it, we had an average year of about 5.5%. It was a little bit lower, then kind of rose up by mid-year and kind of has come down a little bit. But over the entire fiscal year, we've averaged about 5.5% on that $22 million balance. And so we're going to get close to, if not right on, that $1.2 million measure in terms of just production of interest for the township. And for the most part, this year in the FY23 plan, this was primarily used for paving operations. We did a sizable amount of on our paving program this year because we were trying to play catch up because of a lot of prior years where we weren't doing a lot of paving. And that's one of the primary functions of a township in Pennsylvania in the first place, is free and open roads, and we weren't even meeting that measure as a township. But just saying that even if you do 150 basis point reduction, a 1.5% reduction, you can just see how that impacts the lowering of the power of that balance. So that balance is really good when you have a lending and, an interest environment that is high, so you get higher interest from it. If that goes back down for some reason or rates plummet, the viability of just the interest produced by that balance goes further and further away from the township. So it becomes less of an asset of a dividend producing machine and more of just a bucket of cash. And that was one where I still think when it was originally set up, and this was, of course, when interest rates were on an all-time low, they're at like, for mortgage rates like less than or near 2% in some areas. I think we had a 0.3% from Pliget quoted on that, which made it like a couple, like tens of thousands of dollars worth of interest. So even 22 million, you can still get almost near zero out of it, really, in terms of just, is this something that is a tool that we can use or not as an interest machine? Another one was just funding critical capital projects. So we've had this kind of narrative that, we live kind of year to year with our capital. That's why we did a 5-year capital plan this year to put into our budget. So now we know for the next 5 years of what are the biggest kind of critical things that we need to assess as a township. And even in that ilk, it was kind of, I'll call them like the higher public interest projects, like the funding of the phasing in of the parks and stuff. And while those are great projects, if whatever measure of support they might have, are they the most critical ones that we need to do as a township right now? And I would say from a priority standpoint, I would funnel in some of these other measures before that. So I would focus on bridges, roads, stormwater type improvements, things that are infrastructure accessible limitations if you have some sort of emergency situation, something happens. And all of a sudden now you're having to do this without a plan in place. So at least our capital plan addresses this. Another one was we had kind of a lot of discussions about what is the optimum level of staffing for the township. You know, when I got here, we were kind of at the level that we were, but we were still missing one key piece. And that was because we had 0 people in our community development department. None. I mean, we had lost a person from the year prior in September, and we had no person even in that seat up until I think it was June of this year. So we went that long with using a third-party vendor, which actually ends up costing more over the long run because they bill for a pretty high level of service. And not only that, you're also not meeting the demand of the township. We had nobody doing inspections. We had nobody doing, zoning and property reviews. We had nobody out there proactively enforcing property codes. We had nobody doing, and we didn't even have a commercial grade fire inspection program. So those are the things that I would consider to be those critical life safety components of a community development department that we didn't have staffing for that either. So those were the recommendations to finally address that kind of big key missing component, which is for a township, the land development, the community development, that type of function, those types of measures. And that's what was added to the actual plan for the 4.5. I think it ended up being full staffing increases between last year's amendment process and this year's FY24 plan. And even then, if you were adding all of those salaries and wages together, that equated to about $350,000 to $360,000 total. So we're talking about a total $1.8 million budget. 4.5 people equated to $380,000 of that. So as I'm saying, it was a very small portion to do something very significant to improve. I would consider to be at the critical mass department in our township that was essentially floundering, and we were able to address and fix that. And also make it a strength moving forward as well, which is the key part. And then we've had a lot of talk about strategic plans, kind of the connective tissue between your budget funding plan and your comprehensive plan. And that's great, grand, and wonderful. But if you don't have township utilizing technology to be able to gather all the data and the metrics required to assess performance against a strategic plan, or if you don't have the ability to source data sustainably in every single element of every single aspect that you provide, in order to show this is how you're performing, you're not going to have that successful of a strategic plan because you're not going to be able to understand what you're actually measuring in the first place to grade yourself. So that's one thing where in order to even achieve that goal, this was always a necessary component. In terms of achieving ROI for capital projects, this is one where the investment originally was an ARPA-funded position to start as a measure of supporting the grant function, who also serves as a financial analyst in our township. But it's one where if we want to be successful in earning significant capital cash from federal and state sources, we need to have somebody fully dedicated to the cause. You know, every single township jurisdiction that we assessed that was really good at grants had somebody almost full-time dedicated to doing that program in of itself, because it's almost a full-time job depending upon how much you're doing, but we end up having them kind of split duties. But that's one where if we want to be successful, we want to make sure that we're investing in it accordingly. So that was one component of it. Another one was for if we want to essentially kind of start finalizing our understanding of what we can do with our comprehensive plan to kind of, I'll call it, regain some momentum for growth. And we need to kind of pick our projects that are going to support that. So one of them is we're going to be talking about tonight, which is the RFP to advertise to seek zoning services to finally update our zoning ordinance in of itself. Act 209 was another project that we talked about in terms of how much are we getting out of development occurring in our township to support transportation improvement initiatives. Act 209 is a measure of that. So Act 209 allows us to enact a transportation impact fee that goes towards development to get money to put into a transportation fund to then blend with other kinds of funding, whether it be grants, cash, you name it, to be able to do transportation improvements, overhauling of intersections, different types of right-of-way type improvements for township roads, implementation of sidewalks, all of those things that improve modality within your township. That is a kind of key area to focus on, which is funny because it was actually also in our comprehensive plan to seek an Act 209 plan, and this was back in 2018. So another part of that too is you don't know what your transportation improvements are unless you have a plan telling you what those transportation projects are. Act 209 provides that. So not only does it give you the fee schedule in order to be able to assess for developments based off of their impact on volume of traffic, but they also give you a transportation capital plan as well, based on your study area, which for us would be Route 41, Baltimore Pike, and a couple other township thoroughfares, that we would assess for that area as well. And then just some other ones that we did in terms of capital projects for ROI. So using ARPA to fund kind of more, I'll call them sizable capital projects that improve operations. That was one of good ROI as well. And then another one, I believe I already talked about this, but just paring down the cost and scale for those big properties of what we can actually achieve as a township. That's a key thing to understand of what makes sense based off of what residents want, which we found out for the New Garden Hills discussion. And then also what makes the most sense in terms of sustainable maintenance operations, as well as the fact that those are just massive properties. And by doing something of a robust capacity, you're going to have a sizable implementation budget for that, because you're just covering massive swaths of public space to be able to put every, put it all over the parks, if you think like filling in the entire park with something. And then just some more kind of small level things, but it was just kind of gaining measures of efficiency within our own budget to track them better. And through that exercise, we were able to develop some kind of internal, we'll call them reductions of time intensive actions, to be able just to have staff not doing redundant manual things. We were able to kind of operationalize a little bit more. So now your staff is not only just focusing on kind of more mundane routine tasks, but now they're able to do higher level stuff as well. So future financial goals, we already talked about keys to success here. So sustainable revenue growth. It's not without risk. A big portion of risk for our current development issues is just the fact that, we don't control one asset, which is primarily the sewer, which controls capacity for future growth as well. So that's a risk. We'll have to work alongside with developers to address what that means in terms of cost of overhead to actually see the elements of a successful development plan for them, as well as just stormwater and transportation costs. If we're having them kind of solve all our issues, just know that no developer is going to come in and benevolently spend everything on earth possible to just kind of satisfy your needs as a township. There are limitations to that, especially in today's cost environment. The developers are on that side of the equation as well. So it's something that we need to understand, that as much as that is a strategy, it's a risk as well. We already talked about zoning map and ordinance update as a model, as well as Act 209. Another one is just, if we're going to start being proactive in our ability to market the township for supporting future industries, it's hard to do that if you don't have kind of like a data-led approach. So one thing that actually is a grant-funded project through through the state as well, are there programs set aside that fund those types of planning projects. This is one of them that they do provide, which is kind of a market assessment. It can be kind of locally based for commercial retail, or it can be industry based off of regional sector growth initiatives. But it's one where it's tough to have those kind of business discussions without kind of a data-backed understanding of what it is you're trying to attract into the township that makes sense. Another one is just our priority is just continuing to try to wholesale our public safety services. The number one and number two biggest expenditures you have in any municipality are police and fire. It's one where townships, as the sole provider of those services, is a tough ask, because we are limited in terms of our scale, and yet those things can scale very rapidly, especially if you're not being kind of proactive and understanding how to ebb growth in those areas. So it's one where we need to have kind of always understanding of who else we can leverage, and in that same discussion, making sure that at a minimum, they're cost neutral or reduction in cost in terms of municipal contributions from other regional partners. It's like you don't want to add just for the sake of adding. You want to add to either A, reduces your municipal expense, or B, slows the rate of your increase as well. So those kind of relationships you want to understand. We want to reassess our capital priorities and the ROI of open space land acquisitions. This has been brought up pretty continuously throughout the process, but we have in our capital plan, which is why we wanted to put a pretty good emphasis in our open space capital plan. Now everybody can kind of see what the plan is out there. What are we looking at? Does it make sense? Those are just recommendations for nominations to approve, but they're not approved yet. And so that's one where it should be a public process, because that's what it's defined with in our actual code. These are just nominated areas, and then we come up with well, how's it being procured? What does that mean? I think providing more context and details is a measure of showing that transparency of, does this or does this not make sense, but not just an open space for the sake sheer due north kind of strategy. It's more of a blended understanding of with all factors baked into it, does this open space property make sense for the township? And I think that's important because if it does, you have more buy-in within that as well. So you're not just kind of doing it for the sake of doing it, and you're doing it while also a lot of people just don't understand it. And then they look retroactively back at it, hindsight 2020. It's like, did that make sense or not? Well, we already did it. And by the way, we did this, this, and this to kind of make sure that we couldn't reverse it. So it's like, you're kind of stuck. And I just want to make sure that we're doing that in a manner that's more kind of a holistic understanding of what it is we're doing. Because even of itself, that is still taxpayer money because it's just earned income tax. And then another one is just always making sure that we are assessing our liabilities. I just wanted to also point out, like, on top of what Act 209 is doing for transportation initiatives, we still, and I prioritize with our partners at Pannoni to kind of come up with a stormwater capital plan. That's one where anecdotally, we have a lot of watershed. We have a lot of water that runs through either over, under, around all of our infrastructure. You know, a rain event like yesterday is just one measure of just how much you can get randomly in the middle of a season when you wouldn't expect a lot of rain. Those events happen, and are we exposed to a criticality of replacement costs that we just haven't fully seen yet? Yet that next big storm could potentially make that happen for us, and that we wouldn't have a choice, we would have to do it. And then I already brought up the investing, and the selling of the township, marketing for future growth. And then just some overall risks. I believe I already brought these up, but just these are things that we may or may not have any control over. For the most part, we don't have control over any of these, but just interest rates, the potential of recession. I gotta like knock on wood and make sure that, you know, don't speak those words out into existence, but it's something that absolutely can't happen if it's not already happening as we speak. And then just kind of what inflation versus stagflation kind of measures. Do we continue to get caught in this kind of current environment? Does it ebb? Does it flow? You know, those are all things that we have to consider as a township when we're making recommendations for our own financial management strategy. You know, what if we are not successful of activating growth? There's just too many hurdles in place that we can't control. Is that the case? What is the plan after that? We need to understand what that means for a township in terms of can we get momentum going? And if we can't, having that honest conversation of what's next and what do we have to start thinking about as a township. Some other risks, you know, if we don't become successful in regionalizing our public safety services, thinking about some of the reasons of why that comes up as a barrier for us to do it. And for the most part, these are the usual barriers. We'll call it conversion of pension plans between two different union associations that might just be a sticking point. Local partisanship, that's one where just people's loss of control can really factor in heavily into those negotiations. It doesn't make sense to do so. It might make complete financial sense to do so, but it might make complete subjective sense to not do it just based off of emotion in the room, people not wanting to relinquish control. And then other things that happen in a CBA for those people, it's the collective bargaining element of merging two different bargaining entities together. You know, that is a very complex process, and it's one where there's a lot of things that can kind of basically collapse a certain negotiation as well. One thing that we're always exposed to, I believe I brought this up at the very initial State of the Township brief, just demographic trends. You know, it's no surprise to anyone that we have a certain, I'll call it aging residential average age in the township that's moving even closer in mass towards our retirement age, and what that means for the biggest primary tax revenue that we have, which is earned income tax. And of course, with that retirement, we'll call it wave, that kind of general ebbing into that in not having a replacement of new types of owners owning properties within the township or working in the township. That's one where, are we at the ceiling right now and will that stay? Or if we're at the ceiling and eventually it will reduce? Well, based off of our non-growth that we've seen, because we've already showed kind of what our demographic trends were, it's more than likely, just based off of just the general shift, that it's going to ebb towards reduction over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. So what does that mean as well? And then, of course, I already talked about this one, but just emergency expenditures for sizable infrastructure. That's one where any of those replacements can be massive in scale and not something that we can necessarily get like FEMA dollars for to completely cover all of our costs as well. So these are just some of the original slides I was talking about, just talking about scope of services and what we provide. There's a lot of kind of misnomers about what is general fund, what is capital fund, what are enterprise funds. And I provided those two first slides that you're looking at now. I kind of wanted to kind of reframe it just a little bit But as we're talking about general fund and capital fund, I'm gonna kind of just go through these. They're on the record, they're in the actual packet themselves. People can kind of educate themselves if they want to, but at the end of the day, property taxes generally kind of fit into the general fund bucket. So when we're talking about the tax increase, we're talking about support for general fund services, which for the most part is operations of people funding service elements of our township via one of these categorical areas, you know? So the indirect costs of, does property tax equate towards parks implementation? That's not a direct linkage. That's kind of an indirect linkage. And it's not one where your property taxes are increasing because we bought a park and we are putting money into it to implement towards, you know, improving the area. So that's one where there was a lot of misnomers about what that means. But just know that for the most part, the tax rate increase is funding the solvency of our general fund budget. And then this is the same slide that hasn't changed from prior slides in terms of the overall cost increases, just basically looking from 23 to 24. And the biggest reasons for some of the increase proposed was we had some consolidation of some of our funds. So we had to take two other, we'll call them non-real enterprise funds that were kind of propped up as measures to support those implementation of parks. We combined those efforts. We actually reduced the cost because all of our parks funds, both through general fund, the New Garden Hills Fund, and the actual recreation fund was over $430,000 all in on an annual basis. And we restricted those down to $330,000. So we're able to kind of condense that down pretty significantly. As well as just, we talked about the need for staffing placement and levels that we had never had staff before that we needed. And then of course the annual kind of ebbing contribution increases for public safety, as well as some needed measures to make our base salary wages, especially when we're trying to recruit, unsuccessfully I'll recruit new public works employees. This helps us get us into that competitive wheelhouse. Like I said, we're not trying to be at the leading edge. We're not even trying to be in the middle of the pack. This actually gets us to a measure of just slightly behind the middle of the pack, but we're competitive. Because before that, and of course the year before that, we were actually, among all reporting agencies, we were dead last of Chester County reporting jurisdictions. So that's why we were unsuccessful at recruiting people, because we were putting them at an employment rate that was not even close to being competitive. And so therefore you're not hiring anybody. It's not hard math to do. One begets the other. So that's what we ended up doing. So it wasn't just a raw increase. There was a significant decrease as well, which $200,000 coming out of a $7 million budget, that's not very easy to find for the most part when you're basically just talking about payroll and costs for contracted services. But we were able to find some significant reductions in the budget as well, which gets you to the kind of original structural element, but now it's broken down based off of the fact that we're funding part of that with the tax increase. We're funding part of that with our use of interest in cash. And this is just what it means in terms of that implementation for the overall kind of rundown of services. And this is where the aggregation of those two pots comes from. And then of course, this is the usual breakdown. People like pie charts. So here's a nice big pie chart for everybody. But for the most part, you're looking at the fact that 60% of your general fund services are for those kind of critical elements that we all understand of, you know, front end as much as possible services. It's just the remaining 40 that a lot of people kind of forget about, but are also critical functions of any government, regardless of scale, size, whatever. Every single municipality in Pennsylvania, across the board, all local governments in the nation fund some element of these service types. Those are just ours. None of these slides changed at all. So these are just kind of informational measures in terms of final approval. I did provide one additional slide, kind of like the general fund capital fund slide for the enterprise funds, just to kind of show people a breakdown, because there was also some misunderstanding of how the airport is actually funded, and it's from their revenues, not from taxes. So that's one where there was kind of a, well, what can we do? And those conversations are for what I consider to be a time to deliberate on what the township's ultimate long-term interest is in supporting the airport. But just know that it's not one where we're essentially interjecting taxpayer revenue into the airport to keep it solvent. That's not the case. Same thing with open space. It is a tax, but it is a publicly voted upon and supported tax that was enacted in 2005, which adds about 0.125 for those who actually have earned income tax. And that's one where it supports now today. I think it's up to about $500,000 per year moving forward into FY24. That is earmarked money that lands right into the open space fund. Now we are using some of that because the act that was allowed us to adopt open space also allowed us to use open space revenues to fund maintenance. So we are basically filling 25% of that. So about $125,000 of our open space revenue is used towards funding for service costs to support parks. And so really, when you're talking about the total contribution of open space, it's kind of maintenance-wise, it's broken up into two different buckets: support for open space in the general fund and support for open space in the actual open space fund. And a significant part of that, I think it's about close to 60–70% of that maintenance is actually in the open space fund. It's not in the general fund. So I think the general fund cost to support open space equates to about 0.7% of the entire operating budget in general fund. So that's something you can use as a percentage base. That's how much our general fund is incurring for tax support for open space maintenance. 0.7%. And then, of course, these slides did not change at all either from the prior iteration of the deck. So all of this is still the exact same based off of what we talked about last month, and that gets us to the end point. So that's where we're at. We can go over any of this, but it's up to the board of supervisors to deliberate from understanding at this time, and if you have any other kind of further comments.
Thank you, Chris. Do we have any questions from the board supervisors? No. Any questions from the public? No. Dan? Or you want to?
Yeah. Yeah, anybody, just make sure they come up to the podium here for the record.
No email saying it was reopened, you're on site, says building is closed to go on YouTube. I have screenshots if you'd like to see them. So I had to get somebody to care from an elderly parent and I ran over here, so I apologize for handing my name late. And I think from all the Huntsville Huts, I named this some of Chris's,
Just want to make sure you're on the mic here so we can actually hear you.
classes. So here I am trying to, anyway. So, do you know why we didn't get an email stating?
If you want to just make sure you turn on the mic and speak into it just for the recording. That's fine. It still is tough to pick up. You'd be surprised if you just.
It's a little concerning because it looks like there may be a disinterest in this meeting where I think people just didn't know that it was on and in person. Any comment about that or
Where did the notice come from that the meeting was
on
canceled?
email? I guess wherever they're generated or NGT, I'd be more than happy to show them to you. And also I have a pic of the site itself. So I don't live that far away, so I was able to get a neighbor to come and stay with my elderly parent, and I kind of scooted on over here.
So
So
we
we
did,
have-
just, I can answer that real quick. We did put out. Is this better? Okay. So we did put out an actual notification. We did lose power this afternoon. It was right around 11:30 and we had without power up until after 2. And then that was when we were kind of understanding that we needed to possibly shift the entire meeting location. And we were hoping that Pico would restore it beforehand. So everything was posted for the closure of the building, but nothing was in cancellation of the meeting.
No, I agree with
Yeah,
that.
and so
it
we
was
did
on-
put out on social, yeah, and then we did put out on social media, on Facebook as well as the website, that everything was going forward as planned, on Facebook at least. I don't know about anything
Not
on
on your
email.
website. I'm not really an active Facebook person,
Okay.
but I just think you should be aware that it's not disinterest. I don't know, I can only speak for the people I know who were going to show up, and they might be on the phone.
Sorry, real quick, Ron, did you have something about that?
Yeah, I didn't get,
Okay.
and, I have a screenshot. But I'm not saying that they said the meeting was canceled, that it would be held on YouTube. Okay, and I have it right here. She has it. Yeah. The point that I'm trying to make to everyone is that the last emails I received was that the meeting was still on, but not in person, and it will be held on YouTube. The only reason I know that you are all here is because I went on YouTube and I said, oh my God, that looks like it's in person. Let me ask my neighbor to run in here so I could run there. That's all I'm
Yeah.
saying. As simple as that.
I don't think we ever said that it won't be held in person. We've never changed our message in terms of also providing a medium to view it through YouTube, but we've never said that tonight's meeting specifically was only available via YouTube. So I don't know if there was some messaging miscommunication, but for the most part, we have never really amended that element of the message. It's always been twofold. It'll be here and you can opt to view it on YouTube if you're not able to arrive. And so
Yeah,
that's
the-
always been kind of the narrative, and we've never changed that. So today's message was only about the building closure without a
It
possible.
said the township administrative building will be closed the remainder of the day due to a power outage.
Mhm.
Township staff will be working from home and can be reached at your email address. The Board of Supervisors meeting scheduled for Monday, December 18th at 7 PM is still on until further notice. Got it. That was at 12:43, right?
Yes.
I received no other emails at all about that, so I went onto your site, which I don't know if I could bring up on this phone, but but I have a screenshot of it, and it still states and just for this gentleman's remark, at 7:59 PM, that's what it said. I can't, it's hard to read. I realize that, guys. I'll read it to you, if I could. The township building will be closed the remainder of the day, blah, blah, blah. The
Mhm.
Board of Supervisors meeting scheduled for Monday, December 18th is still on until further notice.
Mhm.
Again,
Right.
okay? Then when you go on your site, it says a live in like big red letters or a red background.
Mhm.
Clicked on that, it took me to YouTube,
Right.
and I was expecting everybody in their pajamas at home, to be honest, I'm only kidding, you know. And here I see you, as beautiful as daylight, and I said, okay, let me go over.
Thank you for
So-
coming.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
So, again, just, it's not disinterest, I think there was, I'll call it miscommunication, if nothing else. So, and I came in late, so I missed some of Chris's remarks, and plus I was a little flabbergasted. So if I say anything here that's inaccurate, please interrupt me. So, I mean, I would still like to express my disappointment that you are increasing the budget, albeit less than originally planned, but still a rather sizable increase. I think it comes out to 61% or something. And I understand that there's a possible intention of raising them again for next year, but as you stated that, I could. Okay. When we were here last month, we requested that you reduce the budget, and it looks like you made some changes, Chris. If again, I might be mistaken, but not sure. And we also requested that you find ways to halt the real estate tax increase, like maybe selling off properties that did not bring in a significant amount of revenue. So when you say self-sustaining, it's not enough. If it doesn't bring in a lot of money, get rid of it. An example is possibly the airport. In addition, we need to eliminate spending monies we don't have and eliminate purchasing anything that doesn't significantly benefit us, the residents. Most of us are residents. We recognize that you may not have been responsible for past poor buying decisions, but we need you to take a thoughtful approach, step back, fix what was done, and not ask us for more money. As previously promised, use the interest in some of the sewer monies to do this. You have this money, and if you took a year or more to fix what is broken, you would not have to raise taxes and perhaps even lower them. Troy, I know last month when we were here, November 20th, I heard when you said something to the effect that you thought it was unreasonable that our taxes had not been significantly raised prior to now, all those years. I think you pointed out 10 years or something. But my question is why did the previous board spend millions on purchases that do us no good when those millions could have been used to possibly even reduce our taxes? How can we move away from the presumption that taxes need to be raised? Wouldn't it be better if we can find creative ways to reduce expenses and generate revenue so our taxes do not need to be increased? With that said, we appreciate that you expressed interest in working with us. How do we move forward to do this? These monthly meetings, they just don't cut it. Having 3 minutes is just not enough time for a valuable, worthwhile discussion. We have a group of people from some of the largest communities throughout our township who are willing to work with you. Again, how do we move forward to do this? So I basically wanted to reiterate, we're not happy, understood it went from, I think, a 3.90 to 2.77. You know, so yes, it's a reduction, but we were aiming for a halt while some of these things were investigated. So while it may seem a win-win, it's really not. But appreciate all the efforts that you put forth into trying to at least, I guess, meet us halfway, but we didn't want to go even halfway. And the other is, you know, a lot of us have a lot to say, and we just need to find some place or somehow to do it besides, you know, these 3-minute interactions. So any thoughts on that? I mean, what do you think the next steps on that should be? Should we be talking to someone on how to do that?
Yeah, any comments or questions you have outside of, you know, the normal board meetings, you can always contact Chris. He's obviously the day-to-day person. So if you have any concerns, if you want to work out something with him, he obviously speaks on our behalf on the daily basis. I know we spent a lot of time speaking with residents who come in and work to, you know, kind of explain it more fully, do something like that. I know he wanted to, well, the whole board really wanted to restart the kind of outreach we do with the HOAs. Were we still looking at that, Chris?
Yes, it's
Getting
more of just
like a month-
understanding
the quarterly meeting you were looking at?
the rhythm of what makes sense, locations and where, not just saying just the most vocal get all the attention. It's way to kind of equitably distribute kind of like a routine engagement process with everybody who is interested. So that's when we're working on getting points of contact from every area. And then we would kind of say for those communities in the southern portion of the township, we're going to meet this time, date, everything, we're going to meet on site, or just have a dedicated time for people to come in here because we can't engage everybody, I guess, all at once because of, you know,
Yeah, that's
capacity
fine.
issues, whatever.
Be
But yeah,
there.
we can absolutely do that. And that's just, and we plan to do that because we do have some significant projects that we're going to be talking about. I believe we talked about here in the budget is just reassessing the understanding of what we want to do with our park properties. That's still on the table. We're not dedicated towards a specific number or a measurement of what we're trying to do yet because we had to basically redo all of the plans for everything starting this year. And then another part of this is, you know, the onesies, twosies is great, but it helps to have kind of like an understanding of how many people would be interested in doing that as well, not just maybe a few core 5 people, because then it's like, is the entire body there? So there's a lot of things to workshop out. So I would just work with whoever is the dedicated HOA point of contact per community area, and we can come up with a schedule. So that's not a barrier to constraint for engagement.
So are you saying we should designate those people and then you would meet with them?
Who is the person to work with? Because right now it's multiple people per area. And so it's hard to understand who speaks on the collective behalf of everybody in that community. So it's one where that kind of need to understand who is, you know, all the chefs in the kitchen. I need to know who's the primary point of contact, who's the
Yeah, and
primary
so
chef.
you're saying a primary person from each HOA?
Yep.
Yeah, like the
And then
president of
we
the
would-
HOA.
I
Yep.
think we could do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we should contact you, Chris, with those names?
Myself and our communications lead there at Siri, who's in the back there, but she helps kind of organize all of the list of people out and helps kind of, in this case, would set up the schedule, if you will. but we can absolutely make that happen.
Okay, and then you're engaged at what point?
Well, Chris would take all the information and then he would relay it back to us. It might be that one or two of us could come, not three, because obviously that would be a quorum. If they have like special quarterly meetings or something like that, if you want to speak with us one-on-one for more longer times, that's certainly something we could look at doing.
I think that sounds like a good starting point.
Right.
And then, if we feel, well, Chris, I have faith in Chris, but I just would like to make sure that, that you're definitely engaging.
Yeah.
And then we feel like we're being heard beyond you as
Correct.
well.
And it was just one to also kind of iterate that a lot of the discussions that were had in these engagement discussions along the way, the workshops, the kind of the one-on-ones, the face-to-faces, a lot of the suggestions were heard. The fact of the matter is they are hyper complex and they require years to possibly undo or reverse course based off of where we got to today. So it's not an in-year change strategy that we could have affected 2024, if that makes sense. And that's kind of why we had to come up with a blended option based off of the parameters that were discussed, which is unreliance on cash, as much reliance on interest income, still fund priorities, and sensibly look at the actual detail of when was the last time that this was a measure that we leveraged in terms of increasing revenues. And that was kind of the last
Well,
sensible option that we had. It just was deemed to be the half option. So that was the ultimate dialogue that got us to this point, which is approving the final budget.
Well, I know our main point is when we have millions and millions of dollars in the bank, it's kind of hard to say, why are my taxes being increased? And while it hasn't been fully vetted and investigated. So we kind of feel like we're putting, the horse before the cart, so to say. So it doesn't make sense. And we want to make sure that you clearly understand where our thought process is. So
Sure.
thank you for
Yeah,
your
thank you for your
time.
time.
And like I said, more people would have been here if it wasn't for the confusion of the emails and what you had posted on, not you personally,
Right.
whatever was posted on the site.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment. Again, Chris, I wanted to say thank you for the presentation. I think you did a great job. I think you continue to help improve the New Garden Township. I really do. So I did a great job. I support the tax increase. I said that last time. I was curious though, this is a residential tax plan. Is there any idea about commercial?
It's both. I just want to make sure. So the primary point of interest has come from residential owners, but this is an all-inclusive property tax. So it's both. We
Oh.
can't separate out any differentiation of property tax based off of categorization of commercial versus residential.
I
So-
remember earlier presentation where you did break down commercial
Mm-hmm.
versus residential, and commercial was kind of like underwater.
Yep.
Compared to, I guess, land space.
Yes.
Right? Is there a way to impact that?
Well, that was one of the things we brought up. So it is the assessed value of those commercial properties that is the issue, not the scale of its presence. Actually, in this
It's not
instance,
even
it's both.
commercial.
It's the scale of commercial that we have in our township that's categorized as commercial, and then the actual valuation from Chester County. So it's one where, based in 1998, when they asked the assessment back then, because the county classifies agricultural mushroom production as commercial, that's how it's coded. So when they give us those assessed values, commercial is inclusive of that, and we have the most of it. And so it takes up over 26% of our land acreage, and that's where it underperforms. It's just the
Yeah.
scale of it is not assessed at, a viable level that's either neutral or plus. It was actually about 10% in the negative in terms of evaluation.
Now is it Pure Filter that's going in where the old Agilent?
Pure Light, yes.
Yeah. Are they being reassessed for that property? Because they're
No,
going off
that's
the
another
old
function of
assessment.
when you're a Chester County business owner, resident, for the most part, you are going into a time machine and going back into 1998 and basically being assessed at the assessed proximity of values around you at that point in time. So it's one where we're kind of captured to that until the county updates its assessment process.
And my final comment was just with the airport. I mean, I don't know. it seems like it's self-sustaining at this point, but is there opportunity for revenue increases? It is it's getting busier. I can hear them coming in and
Yeah.
out. But just a comment more than anything. But again, thank you, and I appreciate everything. And again, I support everything you guys are doing, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just two quick comments though, just so you all know, if you ever work on your property, it would be reassessed for the increased value of whatever structure if you finish the basement at a pool or something. So the large amount of internal investments that Purolite is doing to the property will be reassessed in the future, but the actual shell of the property will be different. And then as a quick aside, the reason why the mushroom industry and agriculture in general, even though it's assessed commercial, is a heavy drag, is because it also qualifies as agriculture under Act 319, which affords them an incredible decrease in value. So that's essentially just taken off the books because it's considered, even though it's, cement blocks, it's the valuation of it is significantly less. If it were cement blocks producing widgets, it would be assessed at the full value, but since it's producing mushrooms or substrate or something like that, it's significantly less. Yeah, thank you. Yep, Mr. Gall.
Yes, thank you. I have just two questions. Chris, I'm not a mathematician, but anyone would say that the half increase amounts to a 60% increase. Do you have more exacting increase figures that over and above the 60? Is it 61.2? Do you have anything that's more exact than that? Or can I just say 60%?
Yeah, I could just pull up the numbers real quick to get a whole number, but
I was asking about whether or not the 60% increase
I will
is
have
more
my human
exact.
calculator in the back of the room. Just text me a number here real quick to provide, but we'll get you an exact
Sure.
number of the total.
Not a problem.
final increase.
And my second and final question is this: to what degree did the residents' initial reaction to the originally proposed 120% increase have on the redrawing of that revised tax millage proposal? I know that many people were alarmed over that original figure. Does this present a compromise? And to what degree did the supervisors and Chris work together to come up with this compromise?
Well, so originally Chris had presented, several options. One was obviously the full increase, the second was the half increase, and the third was the no increase. And so as you were here for most of the presentations, you could see that obviously the third one, I think for us was just an absolute non-starter because that would continue the financial degradation of the township. So hearing with what other residents had to say, especially our ones on fixed income, we were certainly concerned about them. We looked at a lot of different options for what we could do. And I think the half increase now, and then like Chris said, even more so than what he had originally proposed with just the half increase, was looking at what the interest income would be in the future if we can get these projects online, and if we can kind of, do a sort of soft landing the way the Federal Reserve is trying to do, and prevent a sort of disaster would be what we're looking at.
So you're saying that the residents' feedback did provide a direction for the board. All right, great. Thank you very much, and nice presentation, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
No, and to answer your question, our finance director texted me 62.1.
62.1. Thank you very much.
Okay, anyone else?
I have a couple of things.
Sure.
First of all, I tried to get these documents to all of you today, but I got as confused as that lady over there talked about. I didn't know what happened, and I was here at 4 o'clock and it was all locked up. And I didn't have the chance to give you what I wanted to give you. So I handed it to a person here when I came in, and I got my document.
We got it. Thank you.
I took the time, Chris and I met, and he graciously gave me a couple of hours of his time to talk about what goes on, and I've spent a lot of time catching up to it because I haven't done that before. I've lived in the township for 30 years. He said earlier in one of his documents that the township doesn't have a set of principles, operating principles. And I drafted a set of statements that talk about what the township should be focused on, and that's one of the charts that I put in your package. I'm not going to bore you with all the details of that. Something that I'm bothered with is that Chris and I talked about how to get more out of what's coming in. And my whole thrust has been, as I tried to do the last time I spoke, I believe that we have to have the township and taxpayers working much more closely together for the success of this township. And you'll see in another document I put in your package, all the reasons why I'm concerned. I want to tell you that these comments I'm making about what's going on in our country is going to impact this township dramatically, and all the people in it, and all of us. And I hope you read that at some time. It's not easy reading. But trust me that it has factual, fact-based information from people who specialize in this, who know what's going on, and are trying to warn people. I do a lot of reading, and I have publications that I trust, and those people are saying all hell's about to break loose. Now, that's going to be a direct impact on your plan. If it happens, and it may not happen in 2024 because it's an election year, but much of this is beyond the control of our government. So they can't really turn it off. And it's going to be devastating. And I tried to say that in the last meeting, and I just didn't do a very good job of it. There's a lot of pain. I hope that you read that, and I'm open to anything that you want to talk about it sometime at your pleasure. It's very important. It is going to happen, and it is going to happen the way I'm describing it. I can't give you the timing, but I believe it will happen in the middle of next year and certainly be accomplished by middle of 2025. And that impacts everything you're trying to do. Please pay attention to that and take it seriously. And if you have questions, I can answer them in depth, and we can talk about that together. I also, when I had a meeting with Chris, as I said, and we went through how to get better effectiveness in what's already in the township in terms of money. And he gave me some numbers that I used. I created another budget, and with a 10% increase, we're increasing it, as you just talked about, 60-some%. With a 10% increase, there's a roughly $30,000 overage. That is revenues in versus expenditures out next year with a 10% increase today. I can't fathom why it has to be 61%. And I think just for some feedback, I consider the taxpayers to be your customer because they pay you. They pay the township for services. And I think the township, over the many years I've lived here, has lost total sight of that. And the way that people are responding to me, I've been buried in emails and phone calls since the last time I was here, because I'm making sense to them. And they think nobody's listening. When you take and say we're going to have a 120% increase in taxes, you get attention. When you drop it back to 60-some%, you're making a fool of yourself because it sounds like it's a game. It's not you're not gaming anything, but the perception of this is really important. And it's extremely important that we get taxpayer people talking with you all in some way that gets to be a positive contribution. I have volunteered my time, and I've got credentials, which are part of this package you have, but I couldn't get to you any sooner than I did because I was working on these other things. I've written the principles of operation. I've done the things that Chris told me that are not here and ever have been here. He readily says we don't have any operating principles. You can't have a 5-year plan without operating principles. And you can't manage it. The final thing I'd like to say is it's about money and how you're not trying to manage things, obviously. But it's also about managing people. And I think that the township has too many operations that are non-productive for the taxpayers that are making you have to manage people. And you can simplify that if you get rid of those things. That's not the business you're in. That's not what a municipality is chartered for. It's not a business operation. I've been stabbed by people who say that this whole sewer thing was crazy, and they're pissed. And the timing of what you're doing couldn't be more terrible. How about a 61% increase in your taxes? Do you think the customers believe they're getting more for their money? For 61%? They're not. They're not feeling that way. I've been getting that kind of thing. That's why Chris and I met. I'm confused. Maybe Chris and I will go back and look at the revenues and expenses, but a 10% increase right now covers 2024 with a excess. So how does someone rationalize a 61% increase? It doesn't make sense to anybody, except you guys. And I don't get that. I've done this for a living for 35 years, and I think I understand how to do this. And I don't think Christopher's going to argue with me when I say these are the numbers I've got. I've sent them to him. It's in this package here. And I'm sitting here confused because I was shocked when he told me last Wednesday that 125% had dropped to 55%. I was pleased that NG Hills apparently has been put on pause. I think that it's more of that necessary for people to know so they support you. And they don't get that impression. Some people are calling this the band of the royals. Sit up here and tell people what they can do, and you can have 3 minutes and get out. They're saying things like that. This is not cooperation. If what's in this second package of documents I gave you comes to pass, like I'm saying it will, I'm not a nut. I've been called crazy before, but I haven't ever been wrong. And this is going to happen. What you're going to read, you're not going to like, it's going to happen. And it's going to increase the crime in our township dramatically because people won't be able to feed themselves. It's going to create problems you don't even think about. I don't think about. I'm starting to protect my home in very different ways. We just had an episode the other night. Somebody banged on our door at 11 o'clock. And I don't mean they knocked it. They went boom, boom, boom. And that doesn't happen in our neighborhood. Just some thoughts on that. Sorry to take your time. You have a tough job to do. And the township has done that job without the relationship I'm talking about. With that relationship, you have a lot of people in your customer base, the taxpayers, who can help you and help make sure this thing is successful for the long term. And they're concerned about a lot of actions that have happened recently that just don't add up.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. My name is Ron Smizer, in case you'll see it on the document.
All right. Thank you, Ron. Okay, anyone else? Nope. Okay, so we're going to make a motion to approve the presented fiscal year 2024 final approval or budget. Do I have a motion to approve the budget for fiscal year 2024? Okay, do we have a second? All right, any comments?
No.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you very much. All right, next up, we have the final financial security reduction for 149 Skyline Drive. Do you need anything to say anything about this, Chris? Pretty simple.
This one's transactional. It's just the final reduction from that escrow amount. I believe it leaves them at a zero-based balance, and as is promoted by John Renzo, our representative at Pannoni Engineering.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the reduction of $6,332.42, wiping off the remaining balance for 149 Skyline Drive? All right, do I have a second? All right, any discussion? Nope. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right. We have a resolution for Purolite at 380 Star Road, and that's the approval to extend the land development plan. I think Chris has a little comment, or Winnie, maybe?
This one was recommended by Wendy based off the discussion, so wondering if you wanted to.
This is a very common occurrence. The approval for this land development plan was granted by resolution, and that resolution specifically said they had 90 days to come forward with the financial security and put it in place. They're not ready to do that yet. And so they're just asking to extend that 90 days by 180 days from today's date. So as I said, it's very standard resolution.
Okay, do we have a motion to adopt resolution 888 to give Purolite more time to work on their project?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve resolution number 888 to extend the time frame for 380 Star Road.
Do I have a second? Okay, any discussion? Nope. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, then we have another resolution for Kaolin Real Estate Holdings.
And that's exactly the same. Their land development plan was approved, and they were given 90 days. I think this may be the second extension. This is very common, especially once winter hits. They're not ready to start. So, and this resolution just extends that approval time for them to come forward with their financial security. I think Purolite's actually 105 days. This one's 180.
Right. Okay, do we have a motion to approve resolution 889?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Nope. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, that passes. Then we have a zoning hearing board update.
I don't know, Robert, if you wanted to come up and brief this one real quick, but this had to do with the recent approval at the, sorry, the date is blank on me, on December 14th, or was it this, no, excuse me, December 11th. So if you want to provide a summary of.
So this, as you can see from the background, you may remember that it was in front of the board for conditional use. They came in with a approved plan that had 56 lighting fixtures at all the intersections plus the sidewalk areas. So every piece of the ground at the sidewalk had some sort of lighting to meet the ordinance. So what they seek from the zoning here to down to 13 fixtures. Planning Commission reviewed it and agreed. So the one Planning Commission recommendation was the lights at the intersection, the two intersections with Bancroft Road be raised to expand the footprint for the lighting. So, Rouse Chamberlain's engineer, reviewed that and they determined that, 18 feet would be enough. So, the zoning hearing board granted the, waiver. So is there any questions on any?
Did they look at light shields? I'm sure that's something that they considered.
Yeah, so then in their plan, they have the flat model, which is just pointing
The-
directly down.
Right,
They'll be night sky compliant.
right.
The
that's-
issue is
yeah.
the density in this community
Right,
and our ordinance don't meet up, and the ordinance is, in my opinion, too restrictive. So it would require too many lights.
right. Okay,
And just so the board knows, during the zoning hearing board, there was considerable number of residents that came in support of it. So the public did come out and show their interest. All right? Good.
Thank you, Ralph.
thank you. All right, so we don't need to take any update on that. That's- Since they are a quasi judicial board, they.
Correct.
They
This
say
is
it.
just one that was of significant interest in the Saldo kind of component of development process. So this was one where their expectancy is to come forward, I think in February timeframe to finalize their land development application. But this has been carried over as of I think it was in the spring when they originally were talking about this land development. So this is just another representation of our zoning ordinance measures that elongate practical adoption of things that make sense for any given community. The fact that it's been almost a year talking about lighting.
Right.
So that's something that we need to understand of is this something that we want to continue forward, which
Okay, next up, we have the Westchester University Air Quality Study Agreement renewal.
So I have the actual agreement construct in the packet in of itself. This was one where there's kind of still from the public understandings, there are two things happening simultaneously. One was there was the Department of Environmental Protection's commission study into the township where they provided air quality measuring stations, of which the one that was closest to the actual source point was here at Town Hall, excuse me, over there on the other side of the property, Town Hall. And that was removed as of the end of, I think it was November or end of October, early November, or end of November, but it was removed. And so they are essentially done gathering data from a DEP standpoint. So they provided one data set that was released as of in kind of internal construct of a quality assured section of interval data, and that was provided back in February type timeframe, and that commissioned the process of them starting their own internal analysis. And then they continued measuring all the way through the end of October. So they have like a current report, which is being deemed a letter health consultation report. That's the preliminary report, and then they have this like follow-up data sample if needed. In that same timeframe, the township commissioned a separate Westchester study, of which this agreement is renewing, to basically say, you know, can we rely on the fact that we've had a separate external agency that doesn't necessarily have the township's kind of transparency measure behind it, and also just in terms of a point of validity, because the measuring areas in proximity to the possible source point were different. The Westchester measurement stations are much closer, so those readings are going to be somewhat different, but they're reading for the same substances and just like the hydrogen sulfide levels. Now, the Westchester University study is also including of ammonia levels as well, which is a different thing to measure for, which was not even included in the DEP. So we are getting more out of this continuation of this analysis. But the real construct comes of what to do with both reports. So from a DEP standpoint, and with that ilk, Department of Health, Department of Agriculture, everybody that goes into like a state funded, not through the township funding, state funded measurement of what's happening in our township in terms of production of hydrogen sulfide. That's what's going to be delivered to the township. And based off of my last update from the Department of Health, they're projecting now for January, February timeframe. It's still something that they had to do not only kind of a back and forth with not just internal staff, but also with the CDC federal level partners to be able to kind of understand what does this health information mean? And to me, what does this physiological measurement mean in terms of health implications for the township? And then in that same regard, now that we have this commission report, what does that mean to shape further on actions from the township, from the state? Who's making what moves and why? So that's kind of this bucket over here. And in that same mindset, it was deemed to be a supportive funding with Westchester for what's going to be the budgeted amount that we had, was to continue this study to be able to say, if there's any sort of kind of lack of complete throughput on one report, we would have a separate one. And now you get kind of redundancy of effort, but it provides validity. So now we have kind of a holistic understanding of what the actual issue is, because the issue could be, well, if they say one thing and it's not that bad, and we just take that as the word of it, based off of the fact that there was limitations in that measurement process, and that flies in the face of this study over here, which was much closer, that's showing a more severe issue, then what? And that's kind of the potential down the road conflict that could be created by not having a separate measurement process. So that's what this provides. We did get feedback from Professor Chaina in terms of just, can you provide some more elaborate information on the actual measuring process, some sort of like locations and stuff. So that is included in the scope of services they're providing. So it's a little bit more information that wasn't in the prior agreement, but that was just to make sure that people understood what's going on, what are they measuring, and how much longer is this going to take place, which this carries us through with the finalization deadline of the end of the year. So any questions from the board? And this was a capital funded item. We had it in our capital budget for a cost not to exceed 25,000, which you should see in the packet.
This is just going to be for one more additional year?
Correct.
Are
Yeah.
there plans to have additional years past that?
That
Let's
is up
see how-
to the board of supervisors and the public to want to continue measurement based off of where we're at. But it pretty much all, in terms of a process moving forward, it starts with what is the after action understanding of what the Department of Health letter health consultation report yields, and then what we're doing moving forward with it. But it would make sense to the township to have this in its hip pocket to say, here's another substantive, scaled, valid, data sample and commission report. They're not just going to do just a sampling. Here's just raw data. They're going to synthesize their understanding and analysis of that report. So we get a second report.
Okay, so I'll make a motion pending review of the township solicitor's approval that we enter into another year not to exceed 25,000 with Westchester University Air Quality Study. And that's for the physical year of 2024.
I'll second.
It's approved for the 23 for the funding. It's a process that's moving forward in 24. I just want to make sure that's clear.
For clarification.
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion? No, just wanted to get a quick, looks good to you, Don and Ron? Okay. All right, all in favor, say aye.
wait.
Oh, no, sorry, Mr. Dungy?
His name is Professor Lorenzo Chaina, and I can't remember his exact title at Westchester, but he's kind of a toxicology type expert over there for Westchester that, okay, great.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oh, sounds good. Okay, next up, we have the SBCA contract renewal.
So this is another one. It's been making its round across all Chester County municipalities because it's been kind of a point of kind of in August, early September timeframe. The SPCA had a kind of rolling 5-year agreement, not just with New Garden Township, but with all municipalities participating in their services, of which they're the only provider of animal control services in this entire region. So they're kind of the only option. And in that ilk, they basically put out a speculative contract renewal for everybody, but it was kind of like this is what we're thinking. And that was a big number. And so from the representatives of the Chester County Municipal Managers Association, which has management representatives from all townships in Chester County boroughs and then some, they were like, do you want us to kind of workshop this independently as a small group with SPCA directly to come up and negotiate the terms of the contract agreement? So one of those ones is the rates provided as an update to the prior agreement was based off of the fact that they looked at all counties, not just their own kind of just internal revenue needs, but also with Delaware County as well. And they're just kind of mirroring like this is the 2023 reality that it means to perform animal control services at the scale that is required because they are the only show in town that provides these. And so they have a lot of demand for services. And this is for, obviously, if you report like a dog or a cat in an area, they're the ones that assign like an animal protective service control officer. They come to your locality, they pick up the dog or the cat, they take it back, they house it, they try to find a home, so on and so forth. And they were essentially kind of at a significant shortfall, and this addresses that for them. But in the same ilk, the townships, excuse me, wanted to understand that if we were to proceed forward with this, is this one where you could opt out but still get the service? So like, can you be one of those like non-complying and eligible to still get it? Because people would just go there and it's like they're kind of ordained to just provide the services because they're receiving. And that was a provision that was a hard line stance with the townships. You either pay and get it, or you don't pay and you don't get it. So you will be turned around at the door. So essentially, when you're reporting of whether or not you're coming from a certain municipality and they look and they say this isn't one that support, they will not house that animal. So it will be provided back to the township. So there's no more kind of, I call it leeching essentially, but no more of that activity happening. So they're taking a hardline stance as well. So that's kind of where this came to be, which was the understanding that at the end of the day, it is a sizable percentage increase, but the volume of the total contract is not significant in terms of we are able to absorb it within our 2024 budget. So instead of spending about 4,500 per year, it's about 9,500-ish, or excuse me, 9,000 per year. So it's essentially a doubling of our township budget. And that's based off of 2 to 3 years worth of volume of animals that were attached to us from reports. So we kind of have like a no year is exactly like the other. But if you have any questions about the terms of the, essentially it's like a capacity level purchasing that you're doing with like the base buy-in as well as monthly buy-in, and then the cost per animal as well. Those were kind of the key differences in the contract terms. But all in all, it fits completely clean within our one line item within our general services department of $10,000 not to exceed. We'll monitor it because we might have a fat year, but of calls for service. But
So,
that's kind of the history of why it came to be and why this is an issue now.
okay. So since animals don't respect municipal boundaries, if like someone's pet from Kennett, let's say, wanders over and, gets picked up in New
Owner.
Garden, is there some sort of reciprocal?
Yeah, it's an owner-based issue. So if you're claiming your dog and cat, it gets to be the resident of where their property, not where it's picked up.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
All right.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any questions?
None.
Okay, so I have a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve the 5-year full-service contract with Brandywine Valley SPCA pending review by our solicitor.
I'll happily second the motion.
All right, any comments? No? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, comprehensive zoning ordinance and map update.
I realized I didn't click on the last one, but just to kind of zoom forward. So one of the things we've been talking about since we started the whole budgeting process was the fact that in order to achieve some momentum to be able to kind of move forward and grow the township property tax base in the manner of what we wanted to do, which is in alignment with our comprehensive plan. One big sticking point is just how much our zoning flies against that ability to scale new growth or gain momentum towards new growth, because there's a lot of issues in the actual conflicts between what we want versus what we're asking for. There's a lot of misalignment within our current ordinance, and it's pretty easy to spec out. But the RFP process, and as a measure of transparency to the township, was this isn't necessarily something that we have to motion to advertise, but it's one where we want to basically let people know that if we're going to be seeking these services, this is how we're asking for it and the things we're trying to address within our zoning. So this was one where we're going to put this out for an RFP to seek vendor services, any kind of AICP certified, historically kind of experience within Pennsylvania municipalities service level to be able to come in, because this is the capacity that we don't have as a township to provide ourselves. And they would essentially do kind of a comprehensive assessment of everything that we're asking for, as well as kind of current complexities in our current zoning ordinance provisions, and then recommend solutions to those to adopt for a future update. The whole process is about an 18-month process. It's going to be heavily engaging in terms of public outreach, as well as internal staff outreach, board outreach, any kind of stakeholder kind of functions in terms of just engagements, with the kind of final commissioned project completion of this is now your new zoning ordinance. So if you have any questions about what it is we're asking for, this was vetted through not only the CCPC as well as other kind of AICP firms that just kind of did like, if you're trying to define the ask, sometimes it helps to have people who know what they're looking for to look at it as well as just some just kind of prior projects that have been seeking similar types of services. So there was some kind of language that made sense for the township to kind of incorporate and provide forward. So the funding plan is still in place to be able to offset the cost of this project as we get it, based off of the fact that it's viable for a Vision Partnership Program grant, Landscapes 3 program through Chester County. They're looking for these types of projects to approve, as well as we still have earmarked leftover remaining of ARPA funding of almost upwards of 50,000. So in combination of the two, this is a project that we would be able to do a significant improvement at no cost to the taxpayer. So this is one where it's a big win. Potentially, we have to get through it, but.
And this will have plenty opportunities for public comment.
Yeah, this is step one in a linear process of 1,000 steps.
Right.
So we're going to go through it a little bit, but this is one where I just wanted to make sure that people understood what it is we're asking for, because otherwise we would come forward in like January, February with, hey, we're seeking to approve this RFP. This is, well, where did this come from? It came from here. And this came from the fact that we've had 4 months worth of discussions about some of the issues with our zoning, as well as the fact that this is something that abets future growth. So it's like, if we're going to be serious about it, this is step one in a long linear set of steps to get really serious about making changes that people will see.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear. So like for Claire, that your friends that would be interested in this would be something that they could have a significant input on that would help mitigate tax increases in the future. So you really want to get people involved as quickly as possible. That goes for everyone really, but yeah. Okay, do we have any comments? We have a
Motion to approve the advertisement for an RFP for the comprehensive zoning ordinance map review and update.
Okay, you have a second? Okay, great. Any comments? Nope. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, next is a GIS enhancement.
So early on, when we were looking to adopt kind of a remaining ARPA funding balance, part of it was just how do we leverage some simple services that can enhance delivery of service for our township staff, as well as having something for residents to be able to tap into to enhance their engagement with staff in and of itself. So I'm a proponent of the passive use of automated technology to help kind of provide that linkage. So when most people think about GIS, they think about just maps and information on a map, but GIS can actually be configured into a tool, like a software program for people to utilize with like a simple configuration of the probably the most top of mind product for GIS, which is Esri. It's a kind of like they're the Amazon of GIS functionality, if you will. And so we already have an ArcGIS subscription, if you will, and this would be a configuration team of certified Esri engineers to come in. They've already assessed a scope of work for the township based off of our pricing of what we were looking for, and they said that it would be roughly to about 190 hours to be able to do the work that we need, which is kind of twofold. One is right now, we don't have the ability for staff who are doing property maintenance inspections, zoning inspections, code enforcement inspections, or commercial fire code inspections to have like a tabular-based tool to go out in the field and do like a workflow of inspection stuff. So they can be on site on the property using a GIS tool and fill out kind of a workflow that captures data for the township, which is key if we're going to be kind of more metric focused here moving forward, to have that input be sustainable and within a system. So we're not just kind of jotting down notes, coming back to the township hall and kind of plugging it into an Excel tracker, which is kind of what we're currently doing. The other part of that is, and that's going to be for not only our community development team for, you know, doing those kind of general inspections that they're doing, but also for our public works team when they're going out and they're managing assets. So they're actually out in the field doing workflow management for documenting work on an asset out there. They're working on a piece of road, sign, whatever it is. If it's a cataloged asset within our township inventory that's already in GIS, you know, we're now able to kind of leverage from a workflow standpoint, kind of an asset management program for them as well. So we're capturing better information about the work that's being conducted. And these are coming to some of the current limitations of our ERP, which is, for those who haven't previously been discussed, it's our financial system, but it's kind of like a wholesale local government software system that does everything for local governments. But there's some limitations to that. These are some of those shortfalls. And so one future thing that's not included in this scope of work that we want to is a more kind of, they've assessed the requirements for it. It's just that it would be beyond this scope of work. So we kind of did like a, what do we want to fund first, and then what do we want to fund second? And a second capital initiative that we would probably look to put in the 2025 capital plan would be full integration of everything together. And that's where the kind of internal complete, we'll call it throughput of data is limited for this scope of work, but it is providing a tremendous tool set to start getting towards that kind of data-minded approach that we want to be in. And then at the end of the day, they're also doing an external viewer. So think of it like I'm going to go report a problem. If I want to report something in the township, I would be able to go towards our kind of app-based function on our website that we're going to be talking about here in a second. You go on, it'll say big words there, report an issue. You click on that, you get into a map. Wherever you are, you basically drop a pin that secures all your location. You fill out kind of some key details, maybe some feedback information. You can snap a picture and take it. If it's for like a down tree, if it's for a pothole, if it's for whatever is happening in the township, you submit that. It goes right towards the person who's going to be kind of the superintendent assessing that work. If it's a property code issue, you want to tattle on your neighbor for the tall grass, whatever you want to do, that's documented within the system. We don't have that functionality today. It's all done via phone calls and emails, and it's not something that helps it aggregate into a kind of a dashboard, data-led kind of fed dashboard that we would want to get into. So we're talking about strategic plans and assessment of metrics. You need to have volume of data going into those types of systems to be able to understand kind of how well you're performing. So this is kind of the first of a few key steps to improve GIS functionality, because it's a kind of a one-stop shop, kind of one tool meets many software programs that are out there to do. And we're not having to increase our annual cost for service. It's just implementation cost to do it, if that makes sense. So
what's the return on investment for this 30,000? I'm not quite.
The return on investment is improved functionality and throughput for being able to document and leverage work. So it's considered to be an efficiency measure for labor to be able to do all of the collection of information out there that is required in order to basically process it into future decision-making processes of how we're understanding what's going on in the township. So it's a capital cost as well. So it's a ARPA-funded, no taxpayer funded, ARPA-funded project to be able to enhance our technology capacity, if you will. Otherwise, if we wanted to do this in another iteration or just not do it, we would just still be with the status quo. So there's going to be ultimate limitations of, if we want to be a data-fed, data-led organization, and we don't have something like this, it would be really tough to be sustainable in that effort, because we're essentially just doing a manual entry into a tracker and then pulling that information. So you see what I'm saying? Like when we have a lean staff, that's a effort that is a time waste if you're kind of operating in a legacy mindset. What was it called? An analog capacity in a more digital world.
And sorry, did you mention that in the future, it would be able to plug directly into the software we already have?
Correct. Yeah, that's what we want to do. It's just that's beyond the capacity of the scope of work. So the goal was to take ARPA funding, which was provided to the township, to improve enhancements of all across the board. One of them being software. But we earmarked 30,000 for that. This fits that scope. And then there's a second assuming there's a second scope of work behind that, would be the full connectivity. It's just, we're not approving all of that tonight. We would come back, and it probably might make sense to kind of workshop the actual tool set in and of itself before we fully connect it to the actual program in and of itself.
But to answer Troy's questions, it would provide like reports.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You'll get
tracking,
cleaner
so-
information coming through. You'll get better reports. These reports will also be public facing, better ease of understanding of how we're doing, and ease of staff to be able to produce those reports in the first place. as well as the better capacity just to log it in and of itself, because captured work, outside of having something to capture it, you end up losing a lot of that work. And that's just a function of, do you have either a ton of staff to throw at that collection or a great tool to throw at that function? But regardless, you have to have something. And right now we don't have a lot of staff, so you have to have an awesome tool set in place. So this is the replacement of that extra effort of having more staff to do stuff.
Sure.
That 30,000, is it also like the help desk? Maintenance,
Yeah.
any upgrades?
Well, that's the thing. You're discussing more of like what we would get as a proprietary software technology, and we're not doing that. This is already included in our Esri account. They're just configuring the environment of our Esri account. It's like, if you're not fully, and this might be for people who are not fully aware of it, it's like if you have an Office 365 account and you're trying to configure a SharePoint. It's off the shelf doable, you just have to build it, and then it's sourced and it's viable through on4. So it's very low overhead after you've configured it, if that makes sense. So the help desk, everything is all inclusive of our Esri account, which we already have. And that's what I'm saying. We're not scaling that at all. We're just trying to say, hey, we have a low cost Esri account, but it could be much better. The only barrier to that is we have to invest this much of configuration. Then once it's done, it's complete. But now you have a much better tool set, if that makes sense, for the same cost. Yeah. Yeah.
We have a motion to approve the.
And just to provide another bit of clarity, this is the same firm who I understand that they are also supporting Chesco Views. They have a significant amount of experience in Pennsylvania. They understand this area in of itself. It was a very easy conversation to have. And from a procurement standpoint, Pennsylvania doesn't constitute the need to do a RFP process for software-based scopes of work as well. So they've just kind of seen that as this isn't something, but the scale of the amount is why we're doing the actual approval for tonight. But it's not something from a Pennsylvania procurement standpoint that we had to go through kind of the usual parameters for, let's say, like a contract service or something like that. They deem technological software improvements non-RFP required.
Great. Okay, do we have a motion to approve the expenditure?
I'll make the motion to approve.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? Nope. All in favor, say aye. Right, New Garden Township moving on to technology, or staying with technology, website update.
I know everyone's thrilled with hearing me talk all night, so I had a alternative come up here. So it's Siri Romo, our communications manager and receptionist, to talk about, because she's leading our project effort here. It should. But just as a bit of context, this was the ARPA-funded enhancement update for our current website, which was not only deemed to be non-viable, is no longer supported. We don't know when they're going to turn it off. And this was more of an understanding of, can we leverage our ARPA funding to just do the implementation? And then the actual cost increase is a pretty nominal lift. After that, it ends up going from 4,000 to about 5,900 for the website amount. So it's a massive improvement for a very little annual reoccurring cost. It's more of the implementation. So I'll let her brief us up on where we're at.
Good evening, everyone. It's Siri Romo. I'm the receptionist here at New Garden Township. Brief presentation tonight, all about Civic Engage, which is our website provider. So why a new website? Like Chris said, our current website is no longer supported, which means it can literally be shut down and deleted at any given moment. This one we've heard a lot. It's difficult to find, so very difficult to find what you're looking for. You have to go through many different tabs, many different pages. With the new website, it will be easier to condense repeated pages and all link to one, which is probably one of the biggest things for me. There's endless amounts of broken links. And then internally, we do not have capabilities to run reports, obtain accurate information, upload various documentation at once, or in the original file type. So most everything has to be uploaded in a PDF, which is not all the times submitted in that format. And then the overall look, Civic Engage, which is our website provider, this is actually, in speaking with them, have said before that this is the oldest version that they've ever seen. And they did not even know that this provider still existed. So yeah, it's very, very outdated. And then just not a modern look, so it's not a modern look because it's not a modern website. And then another main thing is that hopefully with this new website, there's better communication. So more interactive, especially with Civic Engage, which I will touch on after this. Civic Engage or Civic Rec will be for facilities and pavilion reservation. So it'll be self-serve and it'll be all public to everyone. And then also fillable forms, which is a nice addition. So permits, and then you can report a concern. There's also email notifications, urgent alerts, and then e-newsletter. Hopefully a nice newer one. Our newsletters go out in PDF format, which I'm not a big fan of. So hopefully with the new website, we'll be able to send out a cool email and with images and videos included, hopefully. So fingers crossed for that. Some previews. I wanted to include some images. So I did want to say that this is not the final product. This is all being revised still. So just some previews here. This is our home page. So you can see at the top, let me use this laser thing. This is the mega menu. We have links to our social media pages up here. We have a nice welcome sign and then a search bar up here. And then right here in the middle, we have quick links. So this will be the most important things like agendas, minutes. We have forms, permits, and fees, which is very popular. And then we have probably notifications. So that way you're able to subscribe to the website and get notifications. And then also report a concern, which is nice. If you scroll down on the homepage, next will be latest news. So this is just the news and announcements, similar to what we have now, but it's just a different format. Upcoming events, this will be our main calendar. This calendar will be used for every single board, every single meeting, every single event that we have going on. So you'll be able to look on this specific calendar that is on the homepage. And if you click into it, you'll be able to see what the event is, details of the event or of the meeting. And then down here, it's cut off a little bit, but contact information, quick links, and then some more links of the website. I wanted to include some exact dates for everyone, just so you know where we are in the process. As you can see, we're in between website reveal meeting and some training going on. This is probably the most tedious work that we've done. A lot of training, a lot of meetings with our provider. So this is where we are right now. And then as far as Civic Engage goes, this is for the actual main website. The expected launch date is February 8th. So as clients of Civic Engage, this is some of the stuff that we've done, some of the stuff that's in progress, and then some of the stuff that we still need to do. In progress, design concept revisions. So that's taken the longest time. It's been a couple weeks, actually. We're just tracking a lot of the analytics, tracking all the changes that's being made. And then some of the stuff we still need. So more tracking, more training, and then just finalization and corrections of everything. Moving on to Civic Rec. My coworker, Mike Buck, is doing most of this, but he is out sick currently. So Civic Rec, this is our facilities rental management system. It's a subsite of Civic Engage. So they provide a self-serve page to rent out New Garden Township facilities. So this will be all pavilions at the park. This will be all the facilities such as the small room, the medium room, and the board room. And then this will also include the baseball fields and the soccer fields that we have. And this will include a public calendar. That way anyone can go in and see if it's reserved, what time it's reserved, and basic information on what you, like for pavilions, we get a lot of questions like, oh, can you have a DJ? Or can we take a moon bounce? So that information will also be included somewhere on the homepage of Civic Rec. And then you can also see all the fees, pavilions, rooms, and fields that are available to rent. And then self-checkout is available for Civic Rec. And then it's kind of hard to see, but up here, This is a list of all the facilities and pavilions that are available. And you won't need to create an account or anything, so everything will be public. You'll just go in and then you can create an account if you use the pavilions and facilities frequently, but you won't have to. It'll be all public. And then this is the timeline for Civic Rec. So Civic Rec is a little bit faster. So we are pretty much close to the launch date. So this one is expected to launch January 18th. And then some of the deliverables that we've been doing for Civic Rec. Some of the stuff that we've done: configuration training, facilities training, activities training. In progress, we have some pre-implementation homework, some new garden-specific site build-out, some revisions to do, and then some of the stuff we still need: public marketing and announcement. So this is basically saying, this is what we're migrating to, which is Civic Rec, and we will no longer be accepting forms, because that's what we do right now. We accept paper forms. You just come into the township, you fill out a form, and that's how we file everything. Yeah, so more website training and then more finalization and corrections. Implementation cost. So thank you, Chris, for cleaning this up for me. The implementation costs for both Civic Engage and I think this is supposed to say Civic Rec, but those were covered by ARPA funds. So this kind of gives you a breakdown of year 1, year 2, year 3. With year 1, there is an implementation cost for both Civic Engage and Civic Rec, and that is listed right here. That is what that first year fee is. And then after year 1, these are the following fees after that. For Civic Rec, same thing. Also paid with ARPA funds, $4,088. And then after that, year 2, year 3. So the total for both the using ARPA funds, one-time cost, $25,495.25. Yep. I think that's everything. If anyone
Thank you,
has any
Siri.
questions.
Any questions from the board?
Siri, do other municipalities in the area use the same Civic Engage?
Yes, so a lot of municipalities around here use this. I believe one of the Kennetts, I can't remember if it's Kennet Borough or Kennet Township. I know, I believe New London, London Grove, very popular around here. And they've said it themselves that that this Southern Chester County is very popular in Civic Engage, Civic Plus.
Yeah, just to clarify that, when you can look back into the agenda item, I think it was back in the late spring, early summer, it was like May or June when we approved this body of work. In that same briefing, there was a list of like proximity of localities, but just in general, just so everybody can understand, like municipal websites have a lot of like embedded widgets and tool sets to basically amplify municipal operations, primary of which is communication and engagement. So they're kind of like not just a website, they're like tools that we can utilize on the back end to leverage information to get it out there. And there's only 3 primary providers at a national scale that really do it. And they're one of them. So they're one of, if not the largest in the United States that provides municipal website services, of which I was actually surprised almost like 80% plus of Chester County jurisdictions use Civic Plus. Like this is the most highly proliferated tool around here. So we should be no different than I would consider to be the functionality level. And in the same ilk, I know what exact product they're using. Everyone's paying around this exact same price, of which at the same time frame, we put it in our technology kind of itemized out budget, because one thing that was kind of the original construct of our general fund was that all of our technology services were kind of like apportioned out into different items all over the place. You'll see a very clean breakdown of our technology impact as well for the 2024 budget moving forward, and this is part of that. So think of it like we're kind of finally enhancing the use of technology. It's 2023, we're finally there, but yes, this is a modernization effort that the township has been starving for, especially, like I said, continuing to understand that a lean staff needs great tools to operate with to be truly operational and efficient, and this is an efficiency measure.
Agreed.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Public comments? Nope. Okay, now we're going on to the employee handbook.
Thank
Yes.
you, Siri.
So this is an update to the already pre-approved employee handbook that we actually redid at the end of the summer. There was just one provision that was left on the table for further understanding of what it meant. And that was the fact that we had a kind of like I'll call it like a consolidation of banked leave for out of year leave that was essentially kind of kept at a certain cap level. But that meant that every single year, as we went from year to year, the rollover amounts, especially for those that were eligible to aggregate a certain level of it, was deemed to be kind of like a personnel liability for, let's say, loss of personnel, of which the township has been prone to have throughout the course of the last decade plus, specifically what we measured. So it was one where if you don't have a personnel fund or an HR fund, some sort of set-aside fund that absorbs that risk, in lieu of having that, then the other alternative should be you need to crunch down that out-of-year fiscal risk to the township so you don't have to pay not just in-year accrued leave, but out-of-year accrued leave in that same year. So what we ended up doing was, well, number one is does our leave policy still make sense? Is it even competitive, viable with other Chester County partners? And the answer to that was very clean and simple. It wasn't. We were very restrictive in leave that was lower than 5 years of tenure within a municipality. We were one of the lowest in terms of beneficial kind of incentives for new and or future employees. So if we're talking to you about coming into the township, here's your leave policy, you get the least amount of leave anywhere. And that was something where it's kind of a sticking point if you're talking about as an incentive structure from a personnel standpoint. It's also one that just didn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense to have it because it was a policy that had just been there in the current handbook without an understanding of why it was at that point in the first place. And the fact that we were the only township that had it at that level was kind of an indicator that it had just never really been addressed. So this was one to update that. So we're not above or below, we're kind of on par with other municipalities with this. The second one is what kind of policy makes sense for us. And so a use it or lose it in-year leave policy made the most amount of sense. And that's what we wanted to kind of understand is getting rid of that overage out of year. So essentially, if we are in the middle of a fiscal year, you're only liable to pay out what is accrued within that 1 year, which should be already baked into a certain portion of that line item budget anyway. So you're not having to have a redundancy effort of paying for previous years and the current in-year as well. And this reduces that. So, you know, it's one where it's kind of a give and take. That was kind of a take from the employee, but the other one was updating the overall leave-based balance in the first place. So this reflects that. So the migration effort was the last sticking point. So we kind of came up with a solution that we would essentially have a remaining grandfathered payout for the remaining portion of all leave accrued under 80 hours. And then from 80 to 120, there was a carryover for next year, but that's not vested to be paid out. It's a use it or lose it. And then as of the end of Q1 in 2024, you're clean, you're moving on, and it's just based off of your tenure of employment here at the township. And then we just kind of move on. So that one kind of grandfathering effect was how we had to solve for that. So this is part of essentially honoring prior collected balances for the remaining portion of the in-year FY23 for under 80 hours. That's a lot of complexity in terms of details, but that's how we layered in the final provision to finalize here, which is twofold. It's the impact to the general fund as well as the airport fund in terms of fund balance use for those line items as well. But the overall impact is about $37,000 total, split up between general fund and airport fund. So the impact of the general fund is essentially 26,000. But it's the biggest sell is it's updating, it's getting rid of out of year risk, and it's honoring prior collected leave. So in order to get this policy implemented, we would have to do this. And it's within budget, it's not going to yield a cost overrun, and we're still under budget for the year. So this is something that makes a lot of sense for a township. Specifically, another provision is over 80% of our township staff, this is inclusive of the airport, has been here for less than 5 years. So we have a lot of new personnel. So it just made sense to kind of modernize and update for their expectation levels. And they were all about, I just want like a burn rate of leave that makes sense. I get it bucketed in January 1, and I use it down to the end of December 31st. And then the next year, regardless if I use it, it auto updates to the same balance as you started the year at the next year. And that's what we're going with. You're allowed to collect separately sick leave, but it's not a vested balance. So the only thing that we have in this update as well, and I should have included that, was that employees are allowed to do what we call a sick bank. So you're allowed to collect to a certain level, and then if someone else were to get sick, you can apportion out your available sick leave to them. And that's kind of the understanding of there's some sort of bridge gap always between elongated sick leave and short-term disability that provides some connectivity between the two. If somebody comes up on a hardship and they just need some extra sick leave that they might not have, while still having the full strength of their salary in there. And of course, once they go in short-term disability, that percentage is cut down. And that's kind of the one way that you can do to help support somebody and if they have some sort of fallout or thing. And then of course, personal days were included in this. They went from 3 to 5, but those are non-vested as well. Those are use it or lose it.
Okay.
Can you go back to that total PTO or vacation time? I'm sorry. What it was versus now. I mean, we're not,
Yes.
this is like fair.
It's not only
I think
fair,
it's
we're still.
absurd that we were giving people 5 days off.
So it's one where there's kind of an all across the board spray chart for Chester County municipality. So it wasn't like a clean like average, if you will, but this bottom chart is very much in the average. Some go to 30, 35, 40 days of leave. That was one where if you have like a massive bureaucracy, you can afford for some people to be out for 40 days out of the year. It was one where 25 kind of made sense at the upper echelon bounds.
Right.
'Cause, like, I mean, flies in the face of some of the narrative, but we don't have a big staff. If someone is out for a long time frame, operations suffer. So we have to make sure that
And-
we're giving people the amount of time off that they need, but also making sure that they're in the office and they're available. So that's
Just
our
to be
approach.
clear too, like as an example, like the tornado that blew through here last summer. I mean, Kenny's team was here off hours, like helping people clean up, helping people get out. Like, these are people that we all count on in the community, like to only have 5 days off a year and expect so much is just not fair. Right, and soapbox, thank you.
Any other comments?
No, just for clarification, this does not include the police department. They have their own collective bargaining agreement.
They do, yeah. So essentially within the frameworks, if they would have been included with, like, say, if they were a township staff department, the township sets the parameters and the police department always separately negotiates their specific policy. So but it does provide kind of a framework of what we're doing versus what they're doing, but they are completely separate. Yep.
Okay. All right. Do we have a motion to approve the updated handbook?
I'll make the motion to approve.
All right. Do we have a second? Any additional comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
And if you want to read the second motion, it was 2 motions. 'Cause
Oh,
we're
I'm sorry.
motioning to approve the update and the
yes.
motion to approve the expenditure.
Can I have a
payout.
motion to approve the payout not to exceed $37,781.96?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Yep. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Right. Then last thing, the fee schedule resolution.
This one is pretty transactional. It's just an update. So the primary changes, if you remember back to the summertime frame when we adopted a rental inspection ordinance and a fire code, international fire code program, the fee schedule now incorporates all of those charges for service as well. So our community development staff spent a lot of energy and effort in kind of getting that up to date, as well of collaborating with our third-party BCO to kind of make sure that all of our rates were on par with where we should be at. So, and people should see in the line items within our general fund revenues, kind of some yellowed out areas. Those are just spec'd possibilities. You know, we really have to get into these programs and provide volume to really understand what they mean. So are they revenue drivers in terms of like we're having a major windfall? No, but they are something. And those revenue increases do support the fact that we are now operational with those services with it included in our fees. And everything's already been preliminary updated into our system. So we're just kind of post-approval, January 1st, 2nd, we're ready to go.
Great. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve resolution 887 or no? Because we already did, or is this 80, this is before the other ones?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is what
Even though
happens
up-
when I approve an agenda or write an agenda, and then Winnie comes to me and Friday afternoon with two
Mhm.
other resolutions, and so they're out of order, but this is 887, correct?
Okay. Resolution 887, adopting the 2024 fee schedule.
Yeah, I'll make a motion, we adopt, resolution 887.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Nope. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion's approved. All right, and I think we are done. So, do I have a motion to?
Can I just put one plug out for those who may not or may not be listening anymore? But we put the advertisement out for vacancies on all of our boards and committees. I probably should have said this at the very beginning meeting, but slipped my mind. But since I saw commission there listed twice, the deadline to submit your interest letter to the advertised intake, which is to our township office staff, is at the end of the month, Friday, last business day of the month, December 29th by 4 o'clock. So we do have some reported vacancies. So if you're interested in service to the township, we have some areas that you can do it and just submit those letters.
Okay, great. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn? Second? Yep, any discussion? Nope. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, we are adjourned for 2023. See y'all next year. Have a happy holiday and be safe.